Project Build-A-Bear Reject. I am the principal of this illustrious institution, Monokuma! Pleased to meet ya.
So here's a video on a series that I haven't talked about in a very long time, Danganronpa. Those games where a bunch of kids get stuck in school or on an island, and the only way for them to leave is to kill one of their classmates and not be caught by the others. They have class trials that play out like Ace Attorney, and there's also a talking bear named Monokuma who runs the entire thing. I've barely touched any of the Danganronpa games since I made all those videos on the series a while back, and I still maintain that they're far from perfect. But I also have a gigantic soft spot for Danganronpa. From the story, to the way the games play, well most of them, and to the way they look. I love all of it. But seeing how there's one huge piece of Danganronpa media I have yet to talk about, I think it's finally time to take a look at the 2013 anime. By the way, I'll try not to go overboard on them, but spoilers incoming. I can't talk about this anime without showing them. So first things first, it's very important to know what you're getting into here. This anime is a very streamlined retelling of the first Danganronpa game, Trigger Happy Havoc. It also only has a runtime of about 5.5 hours compared to the 20 plus or so that you'll spend playing through any one of the Danganronpa games. That means the story is very rushed. A lot of the characters and a lot of the tension doesn't get the same build up that it does in the main game because they have to cram so much into 13 episodes. Once we finish one huge story beat here, we're immediately going to the next instead of spending time with these characters, which is one of the better parts of the video game. But I wouldn't be so quick to call this anime terrible for those reasons alone. If you were new to the series and this was your introduction to it, I think you'd still have a pretty fun time with the general concept, but you should know you can't substitute watching this show with actually playing the game. And for longtime fans, I think you'll have the same grievances when it comes to the pacing of the show compared to the games, but it's also perfect for you guys because it's a decent refresher on Trigger Happy Havoc's story. Personally, I don't always want to play through some of my favorite visual novels for the same exact reason. I'm not always in the mood to read all this dialogue or do the free time events or play the Mono Mono machine. You just get the important bits with this anime, and for that alone, I can see its value. If the show was a bit longer and actually had time to include the character building slice of life moments that the games had, then I think there would be a lot more complaints about the show having filler and being drawn out when they could have told a tighter, more contained story instead. This particular story deals with the students of Hope's Peak Academy, a school that only accepts ultimates. So we have characters like Celestia, the ultimate gambler, Hina, the ultimate swimmer, Junko, the ultimate gyaru, and our protagonist Makoto, the ultimate lucky student. And this ultimate stuff is the kind of thing that lends to making OCs pretty fun, by the way. Despite their ultimate abilities, they're still mostly normal students. Most of their titles do shape their personalities and designs, and they come into play during certain parts of the story, but not all of them are. I'm the ultimate moral compass, so I need to be strict about the rules all the time. Most of them are pretty chill regardless of their ultimate abilities or other eccentricities. As a matter of fact, dark as the premise of this show may be, it's in contrast to a lot of the show's humor. At least the English dub.
Internet rule 34, don't fail me now!
I think it's a fun show, but your mileage may vary depending on how much you can tolerate older internet humor.
Hame, forget about it! You're over 9,000!
And on the topic of the show's writing, it doesn't stray too far from the original Danganronpa game, but another downside of the show being abridged is that it delivers the core message that Trigger Happy Havoc was going for in a worse way. In the simplest way of explaining it as possible, the game is really a clash of ideals between a misanthrope who not only believes but revels in misery and despair as the natural state of the world, and a group of students who maintain the belief that no matter how unpredictable or tragic life becomes, you can't give in to that same despair. Reject nihilism, embrace hope. The anime's problem is that they overstate that point. By the end of the show, every other word to come out of their mouths is either hope or despair. And to be fair, the games were like this too. One of my issues with the series as a whole was that they did a lot more telling than showing when it came to the characters and themes. Trigger Happy Havoc hammers on the hope versus despair thing pretty thick as well, especially towards the end. But at least with the games, they would give you moments of levity between major development to major development. development. Just moments where you could take a break from it all and not have to hear those words. Moments that stop you from being completely disinterested in the story because they were just saying the same thing over and over, just in different ways. Moments that were necessary. But hey, check this out. Chris Abbott and Justin Cook are in this show, and they voiced the two most delinquent characters, of course. The dub of this anime was handled by Funimation instead of Bang Zoom and NIS America, who worked on the localization of Trigger Happy Havoc. And that means we're dealing with an almost completely new voice cast, with Makoto's voice actor, Bryce Papenbrook, being the only one to come back from the games. And look, I'm not one of those nerds who cries about dub or sub either, but I will say it's pretty disappointing how the entire Japanese voice cast reprised their roles, but the English cast couldn't. Truthfully, I don't even dislike most of the new voices. I think some of them fit perfectly, actually. I've just grown so used to hearing the game's voices that it's a bit jarring hearing them sound so different. It's like watching the Ocean dub for the first time all over again.
Right, everybody close your eyes. If you're the murderer, raise your hand.
Okay then. Everyone, close your eyes. And whoever did it, raise your hand!
Looking back, I think my favorite thing about this anime was just looking at it. This anime has some pretty visuals, if nothing else. The entire series does. But I sincerely believe the best thing this show has going for it is how stylized it is. The games actually translate well to 2D animation, which I guess isn't that surprising considering the games themselves were 2D. But you know what I mean. I think the show is animated well enough, and I like how these backgrounds maintain their wonky layouts as best they can. I also like how the show recreated all of the executions. They look like they were lathered in some Vaseline, but I still think it's pretty cool seeing these executions remade. Also, I just want to say Celestia's execution always creeped me out for some reason. I think it's because she's so calm and accepting of her death compared to everyone else who's been found as a murderer. It's eerie, she's eerie. Speaking of Celestia, let me give this anime some bare minimum praise. I think the anime handled Celestia's trial, aka the worst trial in the game, better than the game did. I think the anime rushing through it, as they do with everything else, actually made it a bit more digestible. By design, it's super confusing with different people being attacked and victims being transported around. But this is a rare case where I think them hitting the biggest pieces of evidence and not going off on too many tangents actually worked in their favor. Depending on who you ask, she had the best motive for murder as well. See, Monokuma had promised the next person to kill someone like $1 gazillion, and she wanted to use that money to buy a castle and have hot vampire servants. What would you do with that much money? Be honest, come on. Don't lie to me.
Are you okay with this?
As I was writing the script for this video, I also went back to play through some of Trigger Happy Havoc because I needed to get some footage of it. And I was also reminded of another one of my larger gripes with all the Danganronpa games, and that's the class trials themselves. You see, the students have to all talk through the murder in order to find the culprit together, but a lot of times it falls on the protagonist, in this case Makoto, to piece everything together and solve the case. And I know it's a video game, you have to suspend disbelief. The player needs to have some input somewhere. You gotta leave room for all those exciting twists. But the way these cases are written, it's like certain characters will already have the case solved, but then go out of their way to not speak up or answer anything so Makoto can solve the trial all by himself. They usually have their reasons for doing this. For some characters, it might be because they think the protagonist needs the closure of solving the case so they can come to terms with it. And for others, it's because they're insane and just wanted to spice up the trials. But none of that changes it from feeling a bit too unnatural, even for a game as out there as Danganronpa. I would think these guys would want to jump in with crucial evidence, or even just outright name the culprit themselves. Because here's something else I haven't mentioned yet. If they fail to figure out who the culprit is, they all die, and no one here actually wants to die. Well, most of them don't at least. But with all of that said, one thing I think the anime does a better job than the games is exactly this. The conversations in the class trials here feel a bit more natural. I think it still mostly falls on Makoto to piece it all together, but it doesn't feel as annoying when characters interfere with his line of thought to say stuff like, "Think it through, Makoto. Tell everyone why this piece of evidence is important." I could do it myself, but I'm not going to. Maybe it's because this anime isn't interactive like the games are. One of the other neat things about this show is the music. This series has a bunch of catchy tunes all throughout, and the anime is no exception. A bunch of the songs in the animation soundtrack are just lifted from Trigger Happy Havoc, but they have some original works too that I think fit the tone of the series pretty well. Here's some super niche trivia for you. The show's opening was rapped by the 49ers, which actually surprised me because they're this super small duo who I've only also heard on Replus's song Imagine. There's like 2 of you out there who will care about that, but discovering that myself was like finding out 2 completely different and unrelated characters share the same voice actor. You know what I mean?
I'm letting you get away with murder, for reals! So stop whining and start plotting!
You want murder, Teddy Two-Tone? Take this shit any further and you'll be victim number 1!
Is that a threat? You gonna impale me on that pompadour?
Bitch! Guys, what's that noise?
Toss him!
Huh?
Trust me, just do it!
While I was looking for more cool stuff related to this anime adaptation specifically, I found a couple of neat things that even a few of you Danganronpa fans may not have known about. I was able to find all these cool scans of different print ads and articles for this anime, and there's some really neat art here that I've never seen before. Whoever did the art for this stuff was totally into the Kiyotaka and Mondo pairing as well. On top of all that, I also read through Danganronpa the animation, the manga, which is specifically an adaptation of the anime, but also not really. First of all, that title is completely misleading. It tells the same story, sure, but this manga is even shorter than the anime is at only 17 chapters. To be honest with you though, I was actually pretty surprised with how much I enjoyed this. Like yeah, there's a lot of details missing, but I didn't even go into this manga expecting it to be as storied as even the anime was. I'm okay with a bite-sized Danganronpa. If we're gonna rush through the story, then let's rush through it. One cool thing about this manga is it gives you a brief peek at Makoto's sister Komaru, who would later star as the protagonist in the Ultra Despair Girl spin-off. Also, I kinda wanna replay that game now. She also did appear in Trigger Happy Havoc and the anime as well, but only for like a second. This manga is one of the only times we ever actually see the siblings interact, which is nice. Another cool thing about this manga is how they rewrite it. Like, they don't just cut stuff out, they'll merge scenes together. For example, when Monokuma gave them all their motives to start killing in the game, he did that after a few days of them getting used to their situation and not fighting at all. But in this manga, he does it pretty much when he's introduced. And immediately after the first trial, we see the second murder happen. As an adaptation, this manga isn't so great, but as a standalone thing itself, I really enjoyed reading through this. Like, if I didn't know anything about Danganronpa and I was just reading through a new chapter of this story each week, then I think I'd have fun with it. But I think that's about all I have to say for the Trigger Happy Havoc anime. So the ultimate question is, does this show hold a candle to the game? No, not at all, pay attention. As a fan of the games, I still think this was a fun watch though. At the end of the show, they tease an anime adaptation for the sequel game, Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair. But it's been over a decade and we still don't have it, so sorry to everyone who prefers it over the first game. At least you got 2x2. There actually was another Danganronpa anime though. 2 of them actually. Kinda. They were both called Danganronpa 3. I'm not going to talk about them at length because they're kind of hard to understand without full context as they're sequels to Danganronpa 2, but they're basically the final part to the entire Hope's Peak saga. That includes all of the games except for the latest original release, V3. That's also a lot of story that I don't want to talk about anymore. But I will say Danganronpa 3 is, well, as a fan of the series, it's okay. I like how everything gets wrapped up for everyone, and I think the show had a fun but kind of annoying gimmick. As I said, it's split up into 2 separate shows, or arcs I guess, with completely different casts, and the way you're supposed to watch it is by alternating between the 2. So you start with Future Arc Episode 1 and then move on to Despair Arc Episode 1, and you do this all the way until the finale. I don't know why this couldn't have just been one 24 episode long season that switches between the stories itself, but whatever, it's not the end of the world. And I thought this anime had some other neat ideas as well. Like in the new Killing Game, they have forbidden actions, which if they violate, they'll be killed. It kind of reminds me of another Kodaka game called World's End Club, but that's another video for another day. I also liked how Danganronpa 3 talks a lot more about everyone's talents, about how having an ultimate ability can define you as a person, or how not having one can define your worth. This is something the series has touched on before, but they were able to explore that a bit more here, and I enjoyed that. But if you thought the Hope Despair stuff was bad in Trigger Happy Havoc's animation, you really haven't seen anything yet. It goes from being a state of mind or feeling to a straight up superpower, and you can harness the power of hope or despair with things like animation and use those to brainwash people into being decent or terrible. I'm not saying that's not cool or I don't like that conceptually, but they never shut up about it. And I mean, it is true that characters were always doing crazy feats with hope and despair in this series. It just gets to be too much with Danganronpa 3. They make hope and despair the show's entire identity. I really would consider myself a Danganronpa defender against so many things in the series that people give it pushback for, but even I have to roll my eyes with some of this stuff. It's like how Kingdom Hearts will bash you over the head with all the light and darkness and heart talk. I get it already, just let me leave Deep Jungle.
Ha means hot.
So check this out, I did actually find a translation of a Famitsu interview with the series creator Kazutaka Kodaka, where he talked a bit about the anime and why it exists in the first place. It wasn't for anything too special either. In his words, they just wanted to make Danganronpa more well known, which I read as they wanted a good entry point for anyone new to the series. And I think this anime is fine enough for that. If you want to get into Danganronpa but don't necessarily want to play through the games, then this wouldn't be the worst starting point. And for all of you longtime fans, like I said before, it'll be good to jog your memory. I'm not so quick to recommend this anime to anyone else though. I definitely wouldn't recommend Danganronpa 3 to anyone who's never touched the games. I wouldn't even recommend it to anyone who's only seen the first anime. I will recommend Danganronpa itself though. This series is so fucking fun. They're definitely a bit dated, but if you want to play through some fun mystery visual novels with a lot of cool character designs and aesthetic in general, please check these games out. The series also has a pretty good ending with V3. It leaves the door open to more Danganronpa in the future, but it also concludes the series in a way that Danganronpa 3 didn't. It concludes the series in a way where if we never see another Danganronpa game again in the future, then I'll be okay with that. I'd really respect Kodaka for sticking to his guns, but even saying that feels like too much of a spoiler. If another original Danganronpa game comes out in the future, then I'd be glad to talk about it. But as for now, I'm done talking about this series. It was fun to return to, but I think I've had my fill.